Welcome to the Happier Life Project, the official podcast from the award-winning mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. Hosted by broadcaster and journalist Gabby Sanderson.
Hi, Gabby with you. Welcome to the show. We hear so much about the biological clock and the statistics surrounding fertility after 40. Those numbers can feel confronting, frightening, and quite frankly, overwhelming. Biologically, as we age, fertility challenges can disproportionately affect women, and the physical realities of conception and pregnancy place a greater load on the female body. But whilst pregnancy happens within a woman's body, the journey to building a family is rarely hers alone. Whether you're trying to conceive as a couple, be that in a male-female or same-sex relationship, supporting a partner through their fertility journey, pursuing parenthood as a solo parent by choice, or you want to get as much information as possible so that in the future you are prepared and give yourself the best chances of starting a family, I hope you'll find something valuable as we explore how can people support both their physical health and their mental well-being whilst trying to build a family later in life. Today I'm joined by the very inspiring Rebecca Rumsey, a functional fertility expert and the founder of Fertile After 40, where Rebecca helps women and men over 40 navigate complex fertility challenges through a science-based, holistic approach. Rebecca's own story is extraordinary. At the age of 41, she was told she was in early menopause and that her chances of conceiving using her own eggs were extremely low. Yet, through determination, doing the work, and improving her health, Rebecca went on to naturally conceive and have 2 healthy children at the ages of 44 and 46. With more than 20 years of experience in health and wellness, alongside advanced training in nutrition, fertility, and exercise science, Rebecca combines the latest research with a personalised approach to help women and men understand the many factors that can influence fertility. Rebecca's goal is to empower people with the knowledge, tools, and guidance they need to make informed decisions, whether they're hoping to conceive naturally or preparing for fertility treatment such as IVF. In today's conversation, we explore the emotional realities of trying to conceive later in life, the relationship between trying to get pregnant, mental well-being, and physical health, what functional medicine can offer, and how to navigate this deeply personal journey with knowledge, compassion, and hope. We also discuss the practical lifestyle changes that help support fertility, what people can do to optimise their chances of conceiving, and why no one should have to face this journey feeling alone. And with that in mind, my friend, ready to find a healthier, happier you? Let's get started. Hi, Rebecca Rumsey to the Happier Life Project podcast. So excited to talk to you today. And I'll try not to let it get too personal and about me, but we are talking about a subject which is very close to my heart, and that's fertility in your 40s, which is your area of expertise, and also an area where I think you give a lot of people hope, in an area where we hear a lot of the opposite. You know, I think it's important that we acknowledge the emotional and the mental challenges, not just, I suppose, in your 40s, at any age when you're planning parenthood. But I did, for the purpose of this, put together a bit of a list of some of the key emotional challenges So I wanted to just share them with you and share them with our listeners. Feel free to jump in if you've got anything to add, and then we'll get into your story and then the takeaways and what we can do kind of thing. But I felt like it was important to address that, when women in particular, we're not excluding men, are trying to conceive in their 40s, they can face a unique combination of biological, psychological, social, and identity related challenges. Of course, every experience is different, but research consistently shows that this stage of life can carry a significant mental health burden as natural changes in fertility intersect with personal hopes, societal expectations, and the pressure of time. So some of the key emotional challenges, and there's quite a big list. So I'm sorry, everybody, that you're going to hear quite a bit of my voice, but I think it's important to acknowledge them. So number one is living with uncertainty. One of the biggest psychological challenges is uncertainty. Unlike many health journeys, there are rarely clear answers. Women may hear your ovarian reserve is low, your eggs are good for your age, it could happen naturally, you may not need IVF, donor eggs may not be the best option. So there's this mixed messages creating a constant cycle of hope and disappointment. Grief that repeats every month, potentially. When women are getting their menstrual cycle, they can feel like it's another bereavement, another failed attempt, another reminder that time is passing. And on that time pressure, women and men, I suppose, but more so women in their 40s, are acutely aware of declining fertility, even if doctors do reassure them, which, let's be honest, a lot of them don't. Many of us feel like we're racing against a biological clock, and this creates consistent urgency, difficulty relaxing, the pressure around every treatment decision, anxiety about delaying IVF, fear of making the wrong choice, etc., etc. There's a loss of control, this feeling that, why isn't my body working? I'm failing. Identity and self-worth. For some women, difficulties conceiving can challenge deeply held beliefs about identity. Will I ever become a mother? Or, of course, will I ever become a father? Have I waited too long? Is my body letting me down? Shame and self-blame. Many women internalize fertility problems. Common thoughts includes, I should have started earlier. I focused too much on my career. I've left it too late. I've ruined my chances. Isolation. To many trying to conceive, it can become quite lonely. Women may stop attending things like baby showers and first birthdays and family gatherings if that's too painful. Anxiety and depression. Research consistently shows that infertility is associated with high rates of anxiety and depression. Some studies have found that emotional distress experienced during infertility can be comparable to that seen in people coping with serious chronic illnesses. Then there's relationship strains, financial stress. Can we afford another round of IVF cycles? Should we be using our savings? Should we borrow money? When do we stop? The mental fatigue around all the injections, surgeries, medications, waiting for results, blood tests, etc. This is a big one. Social media comparison, algorithms frequently amplifying pregnancy announcements and parenting content for somebody trying to conceive. This exposure can intensify feelings of loss or inadequacy. And the hidden nature of infertility. Unlike many health conditions, infertility is often invisible. So women and men may continue working, socializing, and functioning while privately managing profound grief. That's a very heavy load, isn't it?
It is, and very accurate with what I see and with my clients as well, and some of what I experienced.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, myself included with my journey with the egg freezing. But I think let's now really get into you, introducing you to our listeners. And if you don't mind sharing your story, which of course became the catalyst for, helping so many other people who have come on since to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 41, I had a concussion that led to what I was told was early menopause. So I lost my cycle. My FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, was extremely high. And all my hormones basically just went quiet. There, I had no hormones. So I spent the next year doing deep holistic work to restore my health and fertility. And that work resulted in getting my cycle back and getting my hormones into a really great place. So then when my husband and I were, getting ready to try to have a baby, we went to fertility clinics and were told that I had a 0 to 1% chance of success based solely on my age, which of course it's impossible to truly assess someone's fertility without looking at their lab work. There's so many variables that go into assessing this. It's not just age. So I made a very conscious decision to disregard that statistic I was repeatedly presented with and just focus on what I could do to create the most fertile environment possible and make my body the healthiest. And that work led to naturally conceiving my boys at 43 and 46. And that's really what drives my work today, is helping women understand that fertility is so much more a reflection of our overall health than it is our chronological age, and that we have so much more power over it than we're led to believe.
Amen to that. So you met your husband, you just turned 40, right? So
yes.
Prior to that, were you aware of the biological clock ticking, or had you focused in other areas of your life and parenthood wasn't necessarily on the top of the priority list?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a mom. When I was a little girl, I dreamed of becoming a mother. I would, pray for a baby when I was a little girl. I always knew I wanted to be an older mom. Becoming a mom as a young mom never really appealed to me. I wanted to live my life fully as much as possible, do all the things that I knew are a little harder to do once you become a mother, and then become a mom and completely devote my life to my children, because that's kind of naturally just what happens. So it really wasn't until I literally turned 40 that I realized, oh my goodness, like I'm 40, like this is it. And I'm single. What am I going to do?
Right.
It was a very challenging birthday from that perspective.
Okay. Well, it all worked out very well. Can you take us back to how hard was it to turn off the noise of everybody saying, no, it's not going to happen?
At first, it was very hard. It had to become a very, very conscious decision to disregard that and repeatedly tell people, okay, and think to myself, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm not listening to them. I'm not letting that information sink into my mind, into my body. I wasn't there immediately. At first, I was kind of an emotional wreck, really. I was crying all the time. Every time I was in my fertile window, I would be crying, like, this is it. I don't remember the timeline exactly, but it took some months probably to get through that, to finally be like, I can do this. And my husband was a huge support. He was also like, you absolutely can do this. He's like, stop looking at the statistics, stop looking online. I was trying to find stories of success. And there really weren't very many, or I didn't know how to find them back then. Now I obviously have access to tons of stories of success, but back then I couldn't find them really. It was so rare. So I just stopped looking and just started believing in my body.
Do you think then, and I'm thinking of somebody that's incredibly close to my heart, that's having challenges getting pregnant and is using some really horrible language towards herself, saying she's barren, it's never going to happen. And this isn't somebody even very far into their 40s. And I worry that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Absolutely.
I agree. It's so important to become aware of those messages that we're repeating in our minds, and we're repeating them often. It's, I don't know, but probably every day you probably say something negative to yourself or fear-based, maybe hundreds of times. I know with a lot of my clients, they have these really scary tapes playing over and over in their head. And I know I certainly did in the beginning of my journey. So I think it's really important first to acknowledge those feelings. We don't want to pretend like they're not there. We acknowledge them, and then we reframe those thoughts. Even if it's something simple, like I am actively supporting my fertility right now. You can go a little further, and I would try to do more visualization and, say to myself, I'm going to become a mother. My baby is waiting for me. I am waiting. I am patient. I'm sending my baby love. But if that's too hard, that can feel too hard for some women, just telling yourself, I am actively supporting my fertility right now. And just keep repeating whatever message resonates with you to quiet that negative fear-based tape and replace it with a more positive, empowering one.
Yeah, I'm all for that myself. So it was 44 when you conceived your first child?
43. I had the baby at 44, yeah.
Okay. And once you'd gotten your health back on track, how quickly did you conceive?
Once I was able to actually try, we conceived on that first try.
About being able to try.
I was crying for the first maybe 2 months of when I would be in my fertile window. I would come home from work so we could have sex. I'd put it in the calendar and then I would just start crying. And so I thought I'd have to go back to work. I was just such a disaster. So after I got through that hump and I really just told myself, okay, for me, it was about becoming a mother, no matter what that looked like. And that's what put myself at peace. So for me, that meant, okay, we can adopt. And if we can't adopt because I'm too old or whatever it is, I will be a foster mom. And hopefully that will turn into being able to adopt later. That gave me so much peace because my goal was really to become a mother more than getting pregnant and having my own baby. I just desperately wanted to be a mom.
I can relate to that as well. Something that I already have fear about, and I think about a lot, is it's not just getting pregnant, it's staying pregnant. And then we've got all the statistics about miscarriage and very real statistics about miscarrying, especially for those that are older.
Yes.
So how did you keep yourself in that kind of Zen, nurturing mother energy to keep your body knowing it's safe? Because I think I'm very much into the holistic side of medicine and healing. And I do think this is a very important factor.
It's very important. It's incredibly important. When the body perceives chronic stress, it literally deprioritizes reproduction. So it's critical that we give ourselves this feeling of safety in our body. And so what you mentioned, I did so many things. So number one is I tend to be someone who's go, 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 and very analytical and not as in touch with the more motherly type of practices by nature. But I made a very conscious effort to change that when I was trying to conceive. So I started doing things like meditation, even just 5 minutes a day. I would say, okay, every day I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. Probably 30 times a day, I would take 3 slow, deep breaths. Anytime I felt myself breathing in my chest or, just having scary, anxious thoughts, take 3 slow, deep breaths. I would put my hand on my belly many times throughout the day and send my baby love and just say, Mama's waiting for you. I love you. Whenever you're ready, I am here. Just trying to connect with that energy as much as possible. And prior to trying to conceive, I worked in the exercise space. So I stopped exercising so much. I stopped just kind of being more of I don't know what the word is, but just kind of more of a calm woman, more gentle. I walked more and did more stretching and ate more food. And it wasn't about, looking a certain way anymore. It was just about being a mama. Everything for me was about, I'm going to be a mom and I'm going to do whatever it takes to become a mom. If that means I gain weight, which I did, fine. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah. So I would say that's tapping into the divine feminine.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Getting out of my masculine energy, which I tend to live.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women do these days because life has less changed, especially if you're a single lady and you've got to take care of yourself. So then you must have a lot of clients, I imagine, that come to you and find you, and they are that type A personality that is maybe very driven and quite successful at work, but also carrying a heck of a lot of stress. And then you've got, as we opened up the show with, all of this additional stress when you desperately want to become a parent. So what's your kind of first approach then to working with that type of lady that I would say is in her masculine energy?
Yeah. It's hard because I tend to live there too, and I really relate to it a lot, but we have to focus on what is the goal. For a lot of these women, it's about being perfect at everything you do. So it's looking a certain way, it's performing well at work, it's all the things, but we have to learn to let some of that go if we truly want to become mothers later in life. We have to embrace this softer side of us. So it just means we maybe have to start eating a little bit more. We have to start slowing down. We have to start maybe exercising less, depending on what we were doing for exercise. We have to really this is the most important thing, I think, is becoming aware of what you're saying in your head, changing your expectations of, I have to excel this thing at work and all the achieving. We have to decide this is the time in my life I'm focusing on becoming a mom. I can go back to all those things. Once I have my babies, if I decide I want to go back to be this other person, I can do that. But for this phase of my life, my goal is to become a mother and have to kind of embrace all these softer, more feminine sides of us.
When we're talking about, and I'll get more into the health aspect of this, the physical health, but I just couldn't help but think about, and again, I'm thinking about the kind of woman that might be struggling to get pregnant and this boom of the GL1, is it GL1P drugs, the weight loss? GLP1. GLP1. Have you noticed any correlation between infertility and these weight loss medications? I mean, I know there's two different sides to the scale, isn't there? Because certainly there's people that really need them because they are struggling and for health reasons, it's important that they're on them. But then there's the other side where it is becoming more accessible. I think people are finding their ways to it. And again, it's about that aesthetic versus like an actual necessity.
Yeah. What I've noticed that is if a woman is taking them for actual need, if she's actually overweight and has blood sugar dysregulation, has a lot of inflammation, then these medications can absolutely improve their fertility. If they already are at a healthy weight and their blood sugar regulation's good, they're not highly inflamed, their body's really healthy, these medications can not support their bodies always in a healthy way because they are often not eating enough nutrients. You need a lot of nutrients when you're trying to conceive. And they often can become too thin. And so our body needs to have a certain amount of body fat in order to create hormones. So they can be beneficial, I find, for some women, and they can do harm for others.
That's really interesting. Sorry, I'm going to pivot back now to baby number 2. And I was listening to you on another podcast, this was from a while ago, where you said that it took, I think, maybe a year for you to conceive for the second child. And this was something that needed to be figured out on the your partner's side. And you got quite creative. And then it happened again really quickly. So this is all because of health.
Yes. You optimize your health and amazing things often happen. Not always, but often.
Wow. And so you were 47 when you gave birth, right, to baby number 2?
I was almost 47. I was still 46. So I was almost
okay. That's, I mean, just for women listening, that is really inspiring to hear. We're hearing more about, well, the positive and the negative stories that come with IVF, but less of the positive ones where it's a natural pregnancy. So I guess we've got to get into, if you don't mind, sharing some of the what can we do to optimize our health? Like, I mean, I don't know. Where do we start?
There's so much. So in my Fertile After 40 framework, there are actually 8 pillars because there's really like 8 big categories. But I can give you, the high level, most important things that I think every woman and every man too needs to tap into. And I would say the lowest hanging fruit is blood sugar regulation. This has a huge impact over our hormone balance and our egg quality and our sperm quality. So that means when you're eating, getting enough healthy sources of protein, getting some healthy fats, getting some fiber, not skipping meals, especially for women. You don't want to skip meals.
So no fasting.
I would not fast. No, not unless you are really overweight and I still wouldn't do like a long fast, maybe the shorter fast, stop eating at, maybe 6, 7, don't eat until, 9. But no, really fasting typically is not something I recommend, especially for women. For men, it's a little different. Yeah. And then, gentle walks after eating can so help our blood sugar regulation. So that would be the biggest one. And then beyond that, I would say reducing inflammation. So not just treating the symptoms of inflammation, but actually doing the testing to identify why you're inflamed, if you are inflamed, and then taking the steps to reduce inflammation just in general. So not eating or reducing your intake of ultra processed foods, focusing on eating real whole foods as much as possible, managing your stress. That's a source of inflammation, supporting your gut microbiome and your vaginal microbiome. Those actually can really contribute to systemic inflammation, and then reducing our exposure to environmental toxins. So on my own journey, this was my very first step that I did, was really assess my whole home environment, all my exposures, and then make huge changes there, because that has such a huge impact on your egg quality and sperm quality and your hormones.
So going back to the egg quality thing, because that was in my notes to bring up to you, especially as we get older. Everything that I'm getting fed via AI, I suppose, is about like the reduction of egg quality when we're in our 40s. and there's nothing we can do about it. They are what they are, kind of thing. Whereas what you're saying is actually there is things we can do to boost our egg quality.
Absolutely. There's so much research behind this, that there's so much we can do to improve our egg quality. What we often call like age or poor egg quality or poor sperm quality is largely the accumulation of oxidative stress that occurs over time. So the older you are, typically the more oxidative stress you have, because the more years you've been on the planet. So you get oxidative stress from things like blood sugar dysregulation, inflammation, exposures to environmental toxins, chronic stress. So these are all things that absolutely we can control. So the biggest drivers of oxidative stress are things that we can improve. So we have so much power to actually improve our egg and sperm quality by making healthy lifestyle changes.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. So then we talk about like the toxin thing. And I know this is absolutely huge because aside from talking about fertility, mental health, aging well, not getting dementia, toxins is just like really up there, as eliminate as much as you can. But it's very hard to do as well, isn't it? I mean, they're literally in everything.
Yes.
So what do you advise to your clients where it's some of the big ones where it's like, guys, seriously, these need to go. This is really important.
So I always start with, again, the lowest hanging fruit, the very simple things that have a huge impact. So things like do not wear your shoes in your house. Do not track all those toxins into your home. Opening your windows every day, even if it's snowing, raining, getting some fresh air in your house, because our indoor air is 200 to 100 times more toxic than the outdoor air. So that's really important.
Wow.
And being really mindful of your exposure to plastics. So don't drink out of a plastic water bottle, use a reusable glass or stainless steel bottle. I know it's hard because even organic food is packaged in plastic. Everything is in plastic. So we have to just do what we can, but don't store your food in plastic. You can reuse glass jars from food that you've had. And that's what we do often to store our food. Never microwave your food in plastic. Don't use a plastic cutting board. Fragrance is another huge one. So don't buy products that say artificial or that say fragrance or perfume unless they specify they come from 100% essential oils. Just don't buy them. And then replace your toxic products with non-toxic versions as you use them up. So rather than feeling like you have to go buy all new products and make yourself insane, just when you run out of something, use an app like Yucca or Think Dirty or EWG's Healthy Living to find a non-toxic alternative. One thing I can tell you, though, about these apps that I have found, I think they're amazing and I love them. I use them, but they don't often call out fragrance. So you still need to read the label to make sure there's no artificial fragrance in the product.
So like wearing perfume, somebody that wears perfume every day?
I would not wear perfume. Yeah.
Oh, wow. What is it doing? Do you know?
Phthalates, they're huge endocrine disruptors. So they're hugely disrupting our hormones. In your egg freezing process, I don't know if you were told not to wear perfume into the clinic. It's a huge problem. Lots of research behind it. You definitely want to get those artificial fragrances out of your life.
Speaking of the egg freezing process, I've spoken about this before on the pod, not for a while now, but I had two completely different experiences, actually. The first time I got a round done was in the UK. I won't say which clinic it was, but they didn't give me any pre-advice. They didn't ask me how my diet was. They didn't ask me what my stress levels were. They didn't tell me anything about any supplements to take. All they told me was that I'd left it quite old and late in the day and we'd do what they could, but to expect basically the worst possible outcome. And I was giving him a lot of money and just felt like my tail between my legs, for leaving it this long. And I was like, well, I didn't have the money to do it earlier, actually. So can we just do what we can with what I've got, What I found was interesting and learning more later as well was when I went through the treatment and had all the hormones and everything. And it was one of the last scans showed, I think, 19 eggs that were big enough for collection. And I was like, oh, I'm really pleased with that. But then actually, when it came to the procedure, it felt a bit like cattle in and out. Like I remember being wheeled in, seeing somebody else was wheeled out. And it's like, there's maybe a 40-minute window. And then they said to me afterwards, it was basically 6 were mature enough to freeze in the end. But I think they said we got maybe 10. Okay. Anyway, then I moved to Portugal and found this incredible clinic. And this doctor was just and this was a couple of years later, and she was amazing. She did all the checks. She advised on all the supplements, and she was really positive. And she was a woman that had, I think she had 3 or 4 kids naturally and stuff. And she didn't be condescending like I found women that do have kids early on in life can be, of like, well, you've left it too late or anything. She was like, no, we've got this. And she was so positive. And I achieved the exact same results, even though this was at least 2 years later. And I was at the age where egg quality is supposed to massively decline on whatever levels and all this and all that. And when I spoke to her as well about how many eggs were showing up in the scan, and she went, no, that can't be right. If there was 19 that were big enough, there should have been 19 collected. And she was like, are you sure you got that right? And so I showed her and she was like, that doesn't. And anyway, so it made me question, was 10 all they could get in the 40-minute window that I was allocated? You know, you think because it's health that people are going to do their best for you. And what I've definitely learned when it comes to this stuff is that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I find that most of my clients have very challenging experiences with most IVF clinics. There are obviously exceptions. There's some amazing clinics out there, but a lot of them are like what you said. They're just kind of like mills.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, I'd barely come round off the drugs with the clinic in the UK, and they were already saying, when are you going to book your second round? I'm like, hang on, I've just spent thousands on. Where do you think money's coming from? You know, the Santa.
But, and it's an exhausting experience, and it's hard on the body. You definitely need a break.
Yeah, the whole thing was like, oof. But then a really positive experience my second time round, even though it was some years later. I wish I knew then what I knew now, kind of thing, and I made different choices. But
I found that clinic. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm sharing that story just for anybody listening, just to make sure that, like, A, you do your homework, and B, if you're spoken to unkindly, don't necessarily just accept it and go with that clinic. Maybe look into somebody that's a bit more positive, because
I think I went to 3 or 4 clinics and they were all very negative. I had a phone call with a clinic in Greece and they were lovely. But I was in California at the time, and all the clinics I saw there were quite negative.
Yeah. Why do you think they are so negative?
They want you to do donor eggs. So they all were pushing me for donor eggs. And I was saying, I want to try. My hormones are really good. All my numbers look really good. I want to try on my own. And for their success rates, they really want you to do donor eggs. Well, you're not really looked at as an individual. So they never really evaluated me or like, oh, you're right. Your AMH is amazing. Your FSH, like there was none of that. It was just like, you're almost 44. You have to do donor eggs.
Well, I'm going to take that thread and run with it, because this is an article that came out 10 days ago on the BBC in regards to a new study. And the headline was, women hit fertility tipping point at 49, even with younger donor eggs. Sorry, I'm going to read again. Older women face a lower chance of fertility treatment working, even when using young donor eggs, with a marked drop-off from around the age of 49, new research suggests. So this study involved 1,774 women. This idea of donor eggs can fully reset the reproductive clock is not necessarily true, but shouldn't put off older couples from trying. Women aged 49 and over had double the risk of miscarriage than those aged 35 to 40, and were also less likely to get pregnant. Researchers believe age-related challenges in the womb lining may be the cause and could be treatable in the future. So this is kind of actually saying about the whole donor egg things might not actually be much difference, but actually it's more about the womb lining. Have you?
It's both. So your egg quality, and then you also have to look at the uterine environment. So the inflammation there, and is it receptive? So absolutely, both things are true, that they both need to be of good quality. That's why in my practice, we always assess the uterine health and the vaginal microbiome, sometimes the uterine microbiome, really important, because even if you have a great embryo, it's not going to necessarily implant if you have issues with your uterus.
So does this stuff, when you go through the actual IVF process, not the egg freezing bit, but like when it comes to the next step, is this, because I don't remember anything being checked on anything in that respect. Is this something we need to be proactive about again ourselves?
Yes, you need to push the clinic for it. Sometimes they will do it naturally if you're on like your third or fourth cycle. But often I find that my clients had to advocate for it. Even then, they're the ones pushing for this testing. But even before working with me, that they learn about this on their own, then they push the clinics to, to do these evaluations. It's rare that these things are evaluated the first cycle, initiated by the clinic. Not some clinics. Some clinics are great and are thorough, but I would say most of them don't evaluate these things.
If we go on to real quick supplements, and I know this is a huge one, and probably depending on like results of tests, you tweak accordingly, but are there any big ones that you think are a good starting point that women should be taking?
Yeah, absolutely. The foundational supplements. So, and these apply to men really too. You want to start with a high quality prenatal. For a man, it's a high quality male prenatal. I actually had my husband take my prenatal when we were trying. And then egg quality supplements or sperm quality supplements like ubiquinol, NAC. You want to make sure you get those omega-3s, your fish oil or algae oil if you're a vegetarian or vegan. Choline is hugely important. So even if you're eating, 3 or 4 eggs a day, you might still need a choline supplement. Vitamin D3 with K2. So you want to check your prenatal and make sure it has enough of that, depending on what you need. It's really important to test. Vitamin D is hugely important in fertility and pregnancy. So you want to definitely make sure you test that. A lot of clinics also aren't testing the vitamin D or not looking at optimal ranges for that. So making sure that your vitamin D levels are optimized, not just in the normal category. Yeah, those are the biggies. Those are the main ones that I have most people on.
Okay. Stress is a very big topic. We often hear just relax. But when we're trying to conceive, like you can't help it though, can you? You're like, come on, please, may this be the one, please, please, please. And it can feel quite dismissive. So what would you advise in this kind of nuanced relationship between stress, the nervous system, and fertility?
I think it's, first of all, really important to acknowledge your feelings and not pretend like they don't exist or try to suppress them. And you don't need to pretend like you're positive all the time. Instead, we have to change how the body processes stress. So really using those techniques that we talked about earlier, like the slow, deep breaths, changing that mental tape in your head, getting outside every day. This is so important. Just 10 to 15 minutes of being outside, going for a gentle walk, especially in the morning. The morning sunlight's very helpful for resetting your circadian rhythm. These simple practices really can be so powerful in just helping our body feel safe again.
Okay, so just a couple more questions. I wanted to touch briefly on hormones. What role do they play in fertility? And are there any signs that someone's hormonal health may need attention?
Yeah, so of course, hormones are hugely important in conceiving, but hormones, I typically look them as more of a symptom than the core issue. So for example, with our gut health, if we're having dysbiosis in our gut, that can impact our hormone balance. So there's so many things that need to be addressed that downstream affect the hormone. So if you're just trying to target hormones, you're not going to deal with the actual root cause of what's actually affecting issues with your hormone balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, you want to look at your estrogen, make sure it's where it needs to be, your progesterone. Those would be the two biggest ones, but all the hormones matter. You got to look at your thyroid hormones. You got to look at your cortisol. You got to look at everything, and everything has to be working in the right balance.
So is it a really big deep dive then on your health for somebody listening right now that maybe they've been trying for years and they're quite jaded, and maybe they do actually feel like they've tried everything, but perhaps not looked at, say, toxic products elimination and stuff like that? What do you say to those people that are at that stage where they're like, oh, well, I've tried everything, because maybe they've tried IVF, maybe they've tried naturally. The unexplained infertility gets thrown around a lot, certainly in the UK, but almost like a bye-bye, on your way kind of thing. Well, we've done all the tests, you're fine. I hear that story from people a lot. So what do you say to those people?
There is always something that has not been addressed. I have clients that have been on this journey for many, many years. I have a lot of clients that have done 12 or more IVF cycles, and I still find huge gaps in their testing, huge gaps. So you can quite quickly identify a lot of issues that were never before looked at. So I know it's very common to think you've tried everything, especially if you've been on the journey for a long time, because you have tried so many things and it's totally overwhelming. But unfortunately, most of these clinics don't run a lot of the really important tests that we need to help truly uncover what is going on and why you're not conceiving or carrying a healthy baby to term.
So where do we find people that do run these tests so that we can get more insight into our health?
So functional medicine doctors are amazing. Not in the UK, but in America, holistic doctors are wonderful. And then people like myself, fertility coaches often can run pretty extensive lab work. You just want to make sure that they're really doing on my Instagram. I have several posts where I list out, what kind of tests to look for, but there's quite a long list of the foundational testing that you want to have. And then you want to have other specialty testing depending on different variables, like symptoms or even age. There are some tests that if you're a certain age, like your gut microbiome and your vaginal microbiome, I've just learned over time that when a woman's in her 40s, typically she's going to have dysbiosis in either her gut and or vaginal microbiome. So I now
dysbiosis, sorry, that's what I was.
Dysbiosis is when the microbiome is out of balance.
Okay. How do you
for the healthy bacteria in your gut? You have to do for the gut microbiome, you do a stool test, and for the vaginal microbiome, it's a swab. And there's also the uterine microbiome. That's you have to do that through a facility.
Okay. And this can have profound impacts on your fertility.
Absolutely, yes. I have a lot of clients who have had either gut and or vaginal dysbiosis, who either had multiple, failed implantation for years or history of multiple miscarriages. And once those things are taken care of, they're able to actually conceive and have a baby.
Wow. So there's hope for everybody.
Yes, and those are the two biggest things I often see that have not been addressed, I would say. But there's a lot of things that often aren't addressed, looking at things like fasting insulin or leptin, or there's just so many important tests that typically are not being run that are hugely important for women and men on this journey.
I feel like I could ask you so many more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners' time. But I do have this note saying, ask about castor oil packs and air filters. Well, you've talked about the importance of the fresh air. So I'm guessing air filters is, and then I've put in brackets, Air Doctor.
That's a great brand. Yes, that's a great brand. It's an air filter brand.
Okay. And then the castor oil packs. I'm like, I know about castor oil for skin and hair, but I didn't know about a pack thing. You just put that on your body parts.
Yeah. So you put it on your stomach from after you end bleeding, after you stop bleeding to ovulation. So you don't want to do it in the second half of your cycle. And it can help with inflammation, adhesions. It promotes blood flow. So it can just be a nice practice. It can really help with uterine health.
Okay. Well, let's point to all the links because as people have probably gathered by now, there's a lot to this stuff and there's a lot that you share. And also you have the Fertile After 40 Masterclass. So is this live? Do you do this live with your clients?
I don't know. It's self-guided. So people go at their own pace, but I have a private community where people can go in and, talk to each other, ask me any questions that they have about their journey.
So like what we kind of covered / scratched the surface on today, I'd imagine this is the deep dive, the Fertile After 40 Masterclass, right? So this is for people that are like really, really wanting to get pregnant. And would this apply to those that are going down the IVF route as well as the natural route?
Yes, it applies to any woman who's, it even applies to egg freezing. It's all the same stuff. When you're trying to optimize your health for fertility, regardless of how you're doing that, it's really important that you take these certain steps.
Okay. So the website is RebeccaRumsey.com, RUMSEY. We'll add the links to the episode show notes as well, so people can directly click. And then Instagram is Fertile After 40.
Mm-hmm. Those are the main places.
Those are the two main hubs. Okay, so let's just finish on, if somebody listening right now is 42, 45, 48 and wants to support their fertility, what would you say is the most important first step? It could be something we've already covered.
Well, I would say deep dive testing. We first need to make sure that your health is optimized to make sure that you can conceive and carry a baby to term. So finding a practitioner to work with to run some important tests. And then the other things that we discussed, the blood sugar stability, reducing inflammation. Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Things you can do.
Yeah. Well, best of luck to anybody listening that's on this very challenging but rewarding journey.
Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off, Rebecca?
Age does matter, but it's definitely not the full story. There's so much more within our control than we've been led to believe.
I love that to end on. Thank you so much for your time today. I super appreciate it. Hello friends, it's Gabby back with you. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download. You can access all of the content, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you found this episode helpful, please do subscribe and leave a review and share it with your friends. And to find and follow us on social media, we are most active on Instagram, and you can find us at My Possible Self. And I've been at Radio Gabby. Until the next one, do take care. Bye for now.